Hello dear students, my name is Laura and today we are going to learn two tenses, the simple present tense and the present perfect tense. But we are going to learn these tenses in context. So let's try to guess which context we are going to study in this class. To do this, let's analyze this picture. So tell me, what can you see in this picture? Yes, we can see that there is a newspaper. Perfect. But let's continue. Tell me more. What else can you see in this picture? Yes, we can see some different topics. And these topics are called as newspaper sections. So, in this class, we are going to talk about newspaper sections and we are going to learn some expressions to give our opinions about newspapers using the simple present tense and the present perfect tense. So, let's start. As I said you before, we are going to analyze two tenses, the simple present and the present perfect tense. So, to do this, let's analyze the following grammar chart. Here, this grammar chart has two parts, the present perfect tense and the simple present tense. Let's start with the first one, the present perfect tense. When do we use the present perfect tense? We use the present perfect tense to talk about events that occurred at a non-specific time in the past, and they continue to the present. To reinforce this idea, let's use this timeline. So, here we have three parts, past, now, and future. But for the present perfect tense, we just are going to work with these two parts, with the past and now. So, let's remember, simple present tense talks about actions that started in the past, but they continue to the present. That means that that action don't finish yet. So actions started in the past and continue to the present. They don't finish. On the other hand, we have the simple present tense. When do we use the simple present tense? We use the simple present tense to talk about routines and facts. Routines are the things or actions that we do day by day. For example, go to school, brush our teeth, do homework, and so on. And facts are the things that we know that they are true and for all the time. For example, a fact is that the sky is blue and the sun is yellow. We know that ideas of that facts will not change. The sun will be yellow all the time. The sky will be blue all the time. So now let's analyze some difference in the grammar structure. So which are the difference between these both tenses? In the present perfect tense, we work with the following structure. Subject plus auxiliary verb have or has, plus the verb in the third form, that is the present, that is the past perfect, and the complement. So here I wrote the number 3 because, as you know, the list of verbs has three parts. The first part is the verb in the base form. In the second part, we have the verbs in the simple past. And in the third part, we have the verbs in past perfect. So we are going to work with the verbs that are in past perfect. So, this structure is for positive statements. Now, how can we make negative statements? Let's analyze these both structures. What can you notice here? What changed? Okay, here we just add the word not. Subject is the same. Have or has is the same, just we add the word not. Verb is the same, and complement is the same. Subject plus auxiliary verb have or has, not, plus the verb in past participle plus complement. And how can we make questions? Let's analyze this structure with this one, with the first. What can you notice here? Okay, we can notice that we just change the order. For positive, we first have the subject, and then we have the auxiliary verb. But for questions, we first have to write the auxiliary verb and then the subject. The rest is the same. Verb in the past participle and complement, but also, here we have to add the question mark. We don't have to forget to add the question mark. So the structure is auxiliary verb, subject, verb in past participle, and complement. So let's analyze some examples in order to clarify this structure. Here we have two kinds of sentences. In these kind of sentences, we are working with the plurals, and in this we are working with the third person. So let's start with the first one. We have read the news. We is the subject. Have is the auxiliary verb. Read is the verb in past participle. And the news is the complement. We have read the news. Now we have the same sentence but in negative. We haven't, that is the contraction of the word have plus not, read, the verb in the base form, but the verb in the past participle, and the news, that is the complement. We haven't read the news. As we can observe here, we just add the word not. And now we have a question. Have you read the news? As I said you before, we just change the order. Have here come first, then the subject, then the verb in past participle, and the complement. In this case, we have first the subject and then the auxiliary verb. We change the orders. So now, let's analyze another example by taking into account the third person. We have he has read the news. He hasn't read the news. Has he read the news? Okay, what can you notice here? What happened with the auxiliary verbs? That for I, we, you, and they, we use the auxiliary verb have, and for he, she, it, we use the auxiliary verb has. So, also, it is important to reinforce this part. What happened with the verb here? We know that the verb read has three forms, as the same of all the verbs. The base form of the verb read is read, the past is read, and the past perfect is the same read. So just changes the pronunciation. We need to take care with that part, but we are going to work with another verbs that they will change. So don't get confused. Don't get confused in this part. Read is the past participle of the verb read. Yeah. So now let's analyze the order structure of the simple present tense structure. And let's start. We have the subject, verb in the base form, that is the first part of the list of your verbs, and the complement. For negative, we can notice that here we have a big change. Here we add another auxiliary verbs that are do or does. Subject plus auxiliary verb do or does, plus not, plus verb in the base form, and plus complement. So the main difference in this part is that for positive statements, we do not have auxiliary verbs, but for negative statements and for questions, we have auxiliary verbs. Subject plus do or does, plus not, plus verb in the base form, plus complement. And the questions are the same. We have to change the order. Here we compare these both sentences. First, we have to write the auxiliary verb. Then we have to write the subject, the verb in the base form, the complement, and finally the question mark. So let's analyze some examples. Let's start with the positive structure. They read the news. Can you notice the difference between these both verbs? Read and read. So, they read the news. They is the subject. Read is the verb in the base form. The news is the complement. Now we have the same sentence but in negative form. They don't, sorry for this grammar mistake, this spell mistake. So they don't read the news. And the question, do they read the news? So we observe first the auxiliary, do or does, that in this case is do. Then we have the subject. Then we have the verb and the complement. In the case of the negative, subject, auxiliary verb do. In this case is don't, but it's the contraction of do plus not. We have the verb in the base form and complement. And also here we have another example. She reads the news. Can you tell me what can you see? What changed in these both sentences? Okay, first change is that we are working with the third person of the singular, which are she, he, and it. And when we are working with these personal pronouns, so we have to add an S to the verb. She reads the newspaper. She doesn't read the newspaper. What happened here? We have the auxiliary verb, so we have to omit that S. We don't have to write the S anymore. So, she doesn't read without S the news. And finally, we have the questions. To do the questions, we have to write first the auxiliary verb, does, the subject, she, the verb, in the base form read the news, that is the complement. Does she read the news? Auxiliary verb, subject, verb in the base form, and complement. And finally, the question mark. So, before to continue, let's remember that here we have the different forms in which we can use correctly these ones of these auxiliary verbs. We use do and have for I, we, you, and they, and we use does or has, for he, she, and it. So now let's practice. To do this practice, you have to read these comments and you have to underline the sentences that are in simple present with pink and the sentences that are in present perfect with blue. So let's remember the structure. For the present perfect, we have subject plus the auxiliary verb have or has plus verb in past participle plus complement. And for simple present, we have subject, verb in the base form, and complement. So let's do this reading together. Let's do this activity together. Let's read. Wow! The royal couple has had another love scandal. That's unbelievable. Believe it, it's published everywhere. Haven't you read it yet? No, not yet. That's shocking news. And you know the social section never lies. Now the second one. Look, the new host country for the Olympic Games has already been chosen. Really? That's the sports event of the year. What's the fortunate country? It's Brazil. This is the first time for a Latin American country. Wow, that's awesome. So now here we have the answers. For the first sentence, the royal couple has had another love scandal. This is the present perfect because we are working with auxiliary, have or has, and also the verb is in the third form, is in past perfect. So, the second example is that's unbelievable. This is simple present because here we have the verb be in present, that is. That is unbelievable. Another is haven't you read the news? Here we have the auxiliary verb has, that means present perfect. And also we have another one here that is shocking news, so it's simple present. And finally, the social sections never lies. This is like kind of hacked, so corresponds to simple present. And here we don't have any present perfect, so here don't get confused because in this part we have the Olympic Games has already been chosen. We have the auxiliary verb has, but we are working with the past participle of the verb being and another verb that is in past participle. But we have to take care in this part because this is present progressive and not present perfect. So let's omit this part. And the rest is simple present because we are working with the verb is. That is the sport news, that is the fortunate country, and it's Brazil. And as you know, is corresponds to the simple present tense. So now, let's review the newspaper sections. Let's change the topic. So, as I showed you at the beginning of the presentation, we have different topics from in newspaper, and these topics are called newspaper section. And we have international news, social news, local news, business news, classified news, arts news, sport news, and health news. As its name says, they are very clear. International news are news around all the world. Social about events and social comments. Local news about news that happen in the place where you live, specifically there, for example in Loja, in Ecuador. And business are more referring to financial world. And classified, we have the specific parts in which we have the opportunity to read some ads and advices, as you can observe here. We have for sale, we have for looking for work, etc. Arts, it refers to the new publications, to the most recognized artists, to sculptures and so on. And the sports, so they usually tend to report on the results of some games. And finally, we have health, which we report some topics that lets you know, for example, how to eat well, how to do exercises, and new medical discoveries, etc. So now let's practice this part. We have read the lines, the titles of the following newspapers and identify the sections that they correspond to. Let's do this part together. Here we have one that is in Spanish. Consejo Provincial de Loja está completo. Which kind of newspaper section this one corresponds to? To local news. Perfect. Here we have international news, because we have Pakistan lost to China, Saudi Arabia, and so on. These are news about the world. We also have the arts news, because artists show his fans in paint. And the name says we are talking about artists. Also we have new pill reverses memory loss in an amazing way. This is health news. We have Kings Do Battle. The pictures talks by itself. We are talking about sports. And finally we have some ads and comments and advices, and they are classified. Business and service, employment, business and service again, for sale, and so on. So that's the way we can recognize the parts of the newspaper sections. And finally, we are going to learn some expressions that we can use to give opinions or to express our feelings at the moment of commenting news. So we have here 4 expressions. The first one is "that's shocking," that we use to express that we are extremely indignated about the topic. So we have a feeling, but it's like in a bad way. So we have also "that's awesome," and this is used to inspire a great admiration. So this is like in a good way. So also we have "that's astonishing," and we use it to say that we are really surprised about the topic, but this part is also used used in good aspects. And finally, we have "it isn't hard to believe." So that means that it's quite doubted, so we don't believe really that new could happen. So that's the expressions that we can use. That's shocking, that's awesome, that's astonishing, and it isn't hard to believe. Now it's time to practice. You know that practice makes us better, makes us perfect. So let's practice. Here we have to complete. You have to do this activity alone. To do this activity, you have to pause the video and then you come back in order to review the activity together. Okay? So for this activity, you have to complete, to fill in these blanks using the words that you have here in the word bank. And here you have an example. Our basketball team has won the inter-school championship again. So you have to continue doing the same using all these words from the word bank. So pause the video and come back when you finish the activity. So here we have the answers. And in order to give a general feedback of this activity, I'm going to give you some advices that you can use to work with these two type of tenses. So the first one is that you have to recognize the usage of each one of those tenses. The present perfect tenses are actions that started in the past, but they continue to the present. And maybe they could happen again in the future. So we have to take into account that aspect. In the simple present, they are actions that we do day by day. They are comments that we are going to use the simple present. They are facts, as you can observe here. This is an example. It is a fact that most famous students, obviously we are going to use a simple present tense verb. So we have to read the context and have very clear with those aspects. Also, we have some words that let us know the tense. For example, the expressions of frequency we use for the simple present tense. And here we have some words like already and also yet, as you can observe here. These words are used for the present perfect tense. And so what do you have to do here is to read this information. Here you have some simple present sentences, present perfect sentences, newspaper sections and expressions. And you have to classify this information according to these categories. So let's do the first example. We have here the headlines. To which category this information corresponds to? This corresponds to expressions. So let's do another one. I've already read it. This corresponds to present perfect sentence. Sports. It's a newspaper section. I always read the news. This is a simple present. Also we have the word always, the adverb frequency. It isn't hard to believe. Obviously this is simple present. We have the verb be in present. Another example is the social section never lies. This corresponds to simple present because it's like a fact. Also, we have another that is international. This one corresponds to newspaper section. Very good. That's shocking. It's an expression. Haven't you read it? Corresponds to present perfect sentences. Classified corresponds to newspaper sections. That's awesome corresponds to expressions. And finally, business is related to newspaper sections. Very good. So here we have another activity. To do this activity, you have to read the following comments and you have to classify the information according to the ways to express feelings that you can find here. And also you have to identify to which newspaper section these comments correspond to. So you have to pause the video and come back to check the results. So let's check the activity. The first one is already done, so let's continue with the second one. Here we are talking about Olympic Games, so that means that the newspaper section is sports, and also I could find the expression "that's awesome," so I have to write that expression here. In the third one we are talking about economic issues, so that's why the newspaper section could be business or directly economic news. And the expression is "that's astonishing." So let's continue with the next one. That here we are talking about that heavy rain in our city. So we are talking about local news. And the expression is "it isn't hard to believe." So that's all of today, and I hope you learned, and thank you very much for being here.